All right, guys, please turn to your partner, 30 seconds. Tell them your answers to the do now. Turn, talk, go.
He felt shameful that he got drunk and couldn't remember what he had said.
All right, and I say for Gabriel that after his epiphany, he became arrogant enough to where he realized that he doesn't want to be no longer in the world, and that
We're reading 4 stories from Dubliners, which is also James Joyce's his collection of short stories, and each one is just an absolute gem. And each one has a similar structure. There's a main character who is living life and is usually thinking that things are going pretty well, has some problems or some conflicts, and then experiences right at the end of the story an event which produces or prompts this epiphany where they realize that they're actually these terrible creatures, really awfully flawed. What did Jimmy learn in After the Race?
He was being used for his money. So it was like his epiphany was that like he felt bad that he was trying to be like friends with them. So he was almost like being friends with them, but they was using him just for his money.
Yeah, very good. What did Gabriel learn in The Dead? There are definitely 2 answers to this.
Like that he really like loved his wife because he gave like those generous tears at the end, and it was like he realized that he could love her because now he was like not really selfish, and he saw that he wasn't like that important in the world as like her ex-boyfriend.
Give me the definition for characterization. We'll be using it today. It begins with the process. I want like the official AP Lit definition. Jamila.
thank you. The process in which the reader, the author shows off the traits of the character while the reader is trying
Very
to.
good. Reveals the character trait, so you got it. And aesthetic impact, what's that? Aesthetic is a fancy word for? Artistic, very good. Okay. So we know that Joyce wants you to really kind of feel what Jimmy's feeling, but if what Joyce could have done was just told you Jimmy was really out of his mind and didn't understand what he was doing. But then as you're reading, you would have realized Jimmy should have been shameful the whole time, and when it got to the epiphany, it wouldn't have been a surprise. So if he hadn't hidden the drunkenness by using those confused details, the epiphany would have been less strong. So then, why did he do this then?
If he wouldn't have been drunk, he probably would have never did the things that he did, and he probably wouldn't have spent the much money that he spent.
So that's one big one. He could have just not had him do that, and there would have been no epiphany at all. Very good. Say that he still had him lose all his money, but he told you in the beginning, Jimmy's only doing this because he's drunk, and that didn't come in the epiphany. What would happen to the epiphany if the epiphany wasn't a surprise? Simone?
The epiphany would kind of be like inevitable. It'd be like expected.
Yeah, and it would lose that gut reaction that you guys all had. So that's why Joyce does this. And here's a model that you're going to be able to use for your exit ticket. I'm going to take you through this real quick. You'll notice the first part is just a normal AEC paragraph that you guys are so familiar with. But you'll keep this in mind. We're about to jump into a discussion, but you're driving towards one of these for The Dead. So Joyce chooses to hide the narrator's selfishness until the end of Araby to increase the epiphany's effect on the reader. Here's a hint. When you're talking about Joyce, that's pretty much always the answer. He's always doing things to increase the epiphany's effect because that's the most important part of a Joyce story. It's different in his novels. But if you're analyzing a Joyce story, you're talking about the epiphany and nothing else. When the narrator sees himself driven and derided by vanity, the reader is able to understand all at once that it was selfishness that drove his actions. If we had known the boy's true nature the whole time, now here comes the counterfactual. If we had known the boy's true nature the whole time, we would have experienced the epiphany as a moment of comeuppance, where the narrator gets what he deserves, and experienced satisfaction instead of sadness and confusion. Sorry?
So the counterfactual comes after the commentary?
Yeah, it's part of the commentary, but it comes at the end. If Joyce had done this, we would have had this instead. And that lets you know why Joyce did what he did. Mm-hmm.
So would you count that like as your closing sentence, something that ties everything together?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a great closer. So The Dead was a 2-day lesson. Yesterday, we focused entirely on the epiphany and on understanding the epiphany and why it was important. So the entire class on 2 paragraphs where they really dug deep into the language, into the text, and trying to understand what Joyce was saying and telling them. And then today, with that knowledge, they were able to think about the choices that Joyce made earlier in the story that set up that moment. So 151 through 153 is where we're introduced to Gabriel. So I want you to take 2 minutes and write down How does Joyce want you to feel about Gabriel? This is less like his actual, like his character traits, which we talked about yesterday, but how does Joyce want you to feel about Gabriel? Take 2 minutes, write it down, try to find text evidence to bring to the discussion. Okay, the best evidence is evidence that comes from the text, so finish up what you're writing, and let's talk about it. How do you think Joyce wants you to feel about Gabriel?
Joyce wants you to like feel that, I guess, that Gabriel is easily upset. He gets upset real easily, like, because he's so insecure. And I found that because when he was talking to Lily and he was like asking her about her personal life, then it said Gabriel colored as if he felt he had made a mistake, and without looking at her kicked off his galoshes, and he did all that. And she like just a maid, and if a maid can make you that upset, it's like that.
Good.
I said unfaithful because it said, tell me, like, when he said, tell me, Lily, he said in a friendly tone, do you still go to school? It's like when the author put in a friendly tone, it like, I don't know, I see it like kind of in a flirtatious tone, like, tell me, Lily, you know, something like that.
Do you think that Gabriel has ever been successful if he was flirtatious? Do you think he was actually unfaithful to his wife?
Even though he flirted with other females, in a sense, he always pushed his wife away until she realizes that he's being so arrogant that she doesn't want him anymore, and he comes back down to his senses.
I want to point out what I really liked about the first comment, by the way, was that you picked out like one word he used and were able to say how important that is, right? So think about that. So let's look a little bit further on. You're on page 153, I believe, and like the kind of joking with Gabriel about the galoshes. And Gabriel says that it takes his wife 3 mortal hours to get ready. 3 mortal hours to get ready. What are you supposed to think about Gabriel from that comment? He's just telling a crowd, it takes my wife 3 mortal hours to get ready. Think about what you're supposed to think about Gabriel.
Like, he wants everything to be done quick, so whenever she takes a long time, he just, like, exaggerates it.
Good. This is the honors class of the juniors, so they tend to be a little bit higher. But, you know, there's a 12th grade reading level, and then there's James Joyce. So even the scholars who are on level still really struggle with this kind of text. So what I found is that it's really important to invest them in doing the pre-reading. Turn to your partner and tell them, what might it indicate about Gabriel's confidence in his views that he gets so nervous when he's challenged? Turn, talk, go.
How the way he carries himself, his confidence level is probably high to a certain extent. He's not used of being challenged, so like he probably like as soon as he's challenged, he probably breaks down and doesn't know how to handle it.
Good. It's high as long as no one's talking to him. And Danya?
All right, well, we said that we think he feels insecure, and like he would work so hard to prove himself to people, and when somebody would say something about it, he'd be like, well, I worked so hard to do this, and you really just noticed my flaw.
Yeah,
and
he's
then you
working
feel
just
bad.
all the time. It must be so upsetting for him. How did Joyce want you to feel about this character?
Joyce wants you to feel like he's a hypocrite because he always telling people what to do, but then once people tell him that something wrong about him, then he breaks down and don't know how to handle it.
He is trying so hard for everybody to impress him, but when someone mentions his flaws, he's trying to block away from it by distracting himself so that he doesn't feel very challenged enough for
Yeah, good. So I'm hearing all sorts of different, like maybe you're sympathetic, maybe you're not, but certainly no one thinks he's likable, right? So keep that in mind. We're going to read one more passage together, and then we're going to jump into the counterfactual. It's on page 152.
He waited outside the drawing room door until the waltz should finish, listening to the skirts that swept against it and to the shuffling of feet. He was still...
What else do you learn about Gabriel from that paragraph?
He listens so hard to the clacking of women's skirts and the feet in the waltz, and he's shuffling with his cuffs and stuff. So when he looks, after he's down or whatever, he is, hold on, I'm gonna hear it. Like what it says in the paragraph, the indelicate clacking of the men's heels and the shuffling of their soles reminded him that their grade of culture differed from his.
I think he pays close attention to his surroundings in order to determine what he should do and how he should act because he doesn't want a negative reaction from those around him.
And then another thing is that they were saying like he was observant and all that stuff, but I was saying that he was like, what is a word for this? It's like he was very careful about everything that he did. Like he was thank you everybody. He was cautious because he wanted to, make sure he was doing everything right. He didn't want to be superior, I guess.
Cool. You guys really took that apart using the text evidence like that. I was just looking for arrogant. But you guys took it much further. Thank you for that. I love it. I love it when you guys dig deeper than I was digging on a paragraph. That's great. How else could Joyce have made this character? You guys know a lot about him. How else could Joyce have made him? And how would that have changed the story, especially the epiphany? Meaning, all these things you know about Gabriel, if he had the opposite traits, how would the story have been different? Take 2 minutes, write down your thoughts. I spend a lot of time going really deeply into a few key passages, especially those that would be hardest to understand, that will give them anchors so that they can understand the rest of the text. So the passages that we go over together, they understand completely because we've done them as a class, and they can use those to make connections to the rest of the text and understand things they wouldn't have otherwise been able to. So then you know that Joyce made choices. Let's talk about why. How else could he have made Gabriel, and how would the story have been different if he had made him that way?
He could have made Gabriel like a very self-confident person who like crumbled in the end instead of it all being minced together.
Okay. And how might the story have been different if that was so?
Like, he could have been like, loved by everybody. Everybody like, oh, look at you, you're cool. And then like at the end, like things may go wrong. Like instead of him and his wife getting, replenished and all that, it could have like died.
So then if Gabriel was self-confident and didn't need other people to tell him what to do, how might the story have been different? Keep going. Yep.
Thank you. I think it wouldn't have had an epiphany at all, or maybe it just wouldn't be as strong as it is, because if anything changes, then it's like there's no point in you having such a strong epiphany because, okay, you were maybe nice, or maybe you had a lot of confidence, so you wouldn't feel shameful for what you did.
If you change it, it won't really like lead up to an epiphany, because like if he would have never felt was mean to his wife and stuff like that and was insecure and all that, he would have never felt the same way. But if they would have changed it, it would have had a whole different ending because of the way he felt.
Good. Last comment.
It made me think now. Let me tell you why.
I hate it when I do that.
Because what Janice was saying, that what Adriana said, it made me think about the changing of the epiphany. But also I was saying that if he changed it, his arrogance, but still had his self-confidence issues, then he would have never had a Joycean epiphany, but he still would have had an epiphany because he would have realized that he's going to be confident and he's going to be who he is because the people have to accept him.
What you guys all hit on was this. Here's the title of a really boring short story. Perfect person does good stuff and goes to bed. There's no, great husband treats his wife well, they're happy. There's no conflict there, right? So you guys all hit it. There's a reason that Joyce made this guy so flawed. So I'm going to put your exit ticket on the board. In just a minute, though, I'm going to move back to the model. So remember, AEC, text evidence. If it's not a direct quote because you're writing about a whole story and I'm only giving you 7 minutes, it has to be a direct piece of evidence. They'll synthesize their ideas from today with an essay prompt. They'll do that tomorrow. And then afterwards, we're actually going to move on to some nonfiction that deals with the same themes. If you are still working, you have about 20 seconds to finish.
I'm going to need a lot of help with these counterfactuals.
Sorry?
I'm going to need help with this.
With what?
Counterfactuals.
Okay, that's no problem. I love requests for help. Have a great day. Lamont,
Can I
have a
do
great day.
extra on this?
Yes, you can. Could you get it to me by the end of the day?
Yes.
Cool.